conscious beings, welcome to my personal development and spirituality channel. Today we're going to talk about the ego. For those who don't know me, my name is Gaelle. I am a spiritual master and I help conscious people who are looking for meaning and wholeness in life to find the pleasure, the enjoyment and the taste of being again. If it isn't done yet, please subscribe to my channel and press the bell button to receive the notifications. A common conception in the psycho-spiritual field is that the ego is bad and that we out to kill it. While this belief holds some truth, I'll show you in this podcast a different viewpoint on the matter. But first thing first, let's begin with the definition of the ego. In the Oxford Dictionary, they say, it is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance, like in the sentence, he needed a boost to his ego. In psychoanalysis, it is the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious, and that is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. In philosophy or metaphysics, it is a conscious thinking subject. To Carl Jung, the ego is the center of the field of consciousness which contains a conscious awareness of existing and a continuing sense of personal identity. It is the organizer, or the commander-in-chief as he calls it, of our thoughts, our intuitions, our feelings, our sensations, and has access to memories which are not repressed. And etymologically, ego is the Latin version of I, like in I am. In simple words, my words, ego just represents yourself, the conscious part of who you are. Everything you know to be you, whether you show it or not. Now, what is the issue with the ego? Well, you may know if you're walking on the spiritual path, spirituality belongs to the whole realm that is beyond the ego. In this sense, the ego is what prevents you to connect to your true self. It is a mirage, the mirage that blocks you from accessing yourself. In the psychological journey to mental health and balanced psyche, the ego represents all those traits and characteristics of yours that you see as bad, toxic, or unwanted. It may also be these narcissistic aspects of you in the form of overpride, power games, and what is called ego trip. Of course, these behaviors may be seen as impurity to clean up, so for these reasons, you may want to eradicate this so-called ego, and well, you may be right. That being said, if you've already done tons of work on yourself, you may have come to realize that you can kill the ego. You can kill it because it does this thing where as soon as you think you've gotten rid of it, it sneakily reappears somewhere else with new clothes. That is exactly what happens to spiritual people, meaning people who have been diligently working at erasing the ego and access their true spiritual self. It reappears in the form of the spiritual ego. Yep, you've heard it, the spiritual ego. The spiritual ego represents all the traits and characteristics you identify to as a spiritual person. You may say things like, I am spiritual, I am connected to my true self, my ego has vanished, because now you identify as a spiritual person to those spiritual attributes. And you're not wrong. I mean, you indeed have worked a lot on yourself and you may deserve recognition, sure. But the thing is, those attributes now represents the new you, the new who you know you are. That's the ego, right here. Now, if you aren't conscious of it, your newly created ego will run the show. but in the background, all beyond your awareness. And as Carl Jung says it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life, and you will call it fate. You also will start to overpride yourself as perhaps being a great egoless person, egoless master. You will dress like one, you will talk like one, you will behave like one. You will, for example, suffocate your anger because, anger is bad, it's not spiritual. You will deny your own needs or reject anything, really, that you do not deem as good and spiritual. You may start playing passive-aggressive power games with people, gaslighting them, projecting rage onto them, or ego trip over your goodness and devotion. While it may be to some extent benign, it may also hurt other people and yourself. And on the spiritual note, you won't actually be connected to your deep self, unlike you thought, as the road is being blocked by the ego. Okay, so now you tell me that everything I have said so far all goes in favor of annihilating the ego. Well, you're right, but now here's the point of this whole podcast. 1, you cannot kill the ego, as I just showed you. And 2, you don't need to. Why? Because you actually do need your ego. The ego is mandatory to survive in this world and experience a specific and singular experience on this earth. It also is what allows you, as the universal consciousness, to experience contrast and play the game of knowing itself. We don't need to kill the ego, and we also do not need to master it. We merely need to observe it think, feel, and move. In other words, we need to be aware of it. And to remind ourselves that we are everything we think we are and everything we think we aren't, as a larger self, and thus both everything and nothing. Everything and nothing. Fighting the ego also equals fighting ourselves. Fighting ourselves is an act of self-hate. What we want is love, self-love. So let's love ourselves and be conscious. Namaste.